Glorious God, in Jesus, your grace appears, bringing salvation to all. Help us to ponder your words of love by the light of your Spirit, that we may proclaim glad tidings of peace and welcome Christ in our world. Amen. Amen. The lectionary assigns these well-known words from Isaiah to our Christmas Eve, reflecting the traditional and strong theological connection between Isaiah's joyous cry, "For unto us a child is given." You know the song. You know Handel's Messiah. We're all too familiar with that beautiful, beautiful hymn and the telling of Jesus' birth. But we have to remember that Isaiah's words had their own context and meaning in their own history. And we need to hear them again tonight based on that context and not solely on the New Testament context of the Gospel according to Luke and the narrative of Christ's birth. Tonight, we will interpret the Christmas story by shining a light on the gritty, political, and social realities that were very much a part of Isaiah's narrative. The original setting of Isaiah's passage is in the politics of the ancient world, about the 8th century before Christ. To better understand Isaiah's poetry, we need to remember this passage within that larger context. Step back in time. King Ahaz is king of Judah, a ruler between a rock and a hard place. The rock, the nation of Assyria, a major Mesopotamian military power intent on dominating the region. And the hard place, the anti-Assyrian coalition forged between King Rezin of Syria and King Pekah of Israel, leaders of two small and weaker nations who considered their only defense against the Assyrian powerhouse was to combine forces in a military alliance. They wanted Ahaz to join them, but Ahaz hesitated. And so those two kings decided that a regime change was in order, and they sent their armies intending to attack and depose King Ahaz and replace him with a puppet ruler, a compliant partner. Ahaz now has two problems: the powerhouse army of Assyria, who could crush Judah at any moment, and the Syrian-Israel coalition that already had marching armies headed directly for Jerusalem. What can Ahaz do? Snuggle up to Assyria or join hands with Syria and Israel? In these ancient times and political calculations, God sent his prophet Isaiah to intercede. And Isaiah came to King Ahaz with the message of, "Do not be afraid, Ahaz. Sure, it looks bad, but those smaller armies of Syria and Israel, they are no threat to Judah. God is in charge, and God has made promises to Jerusalem and to God's people. Stand firm in your faith." Isaiah added, "If you doubt God's promise, ask God for a sign. Make it as big as you want, as high as heaven or as deep as Sheol." Now, as if the king didn't already have enough problems, now this prophet wants him to bring God into it all. I mean, what if Ahaz had asked for something really big and God answered? Then what? He'd have to believe. He'd have to obey God's command, right? But he's king. Isn't he supposed to figure it all out for himself? Isn't he supposed to stand firm in his own realities that are before his eyes? And so, in Ahaz's fake piety, he responded, "Oh no, I could never put God to the test." So Isaiah responded, "You will not ask for a sign, but God will give you one anyway. The sign that would be higher than heaven and deeper than Sheol would be a baby. Look, the young woman is with child. She shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. In a world bursting with power and armies on the march, ready to fight, the sign of God's promise of peace is the most fragile and vulnerable of human realities. A pregnant young woman and her soon-to-be-born child. Now the promised child has been born, and this child is indeed Emmanuel, God is with us. The words of Isaiah are now broader and more joyous, a proclamation of God's enduring intervention to save God's people in distress. Our passage has opened tonight with a contrast between darkness and light. At one level, this darkness, it was the gloom of a nation in turmoil. King Ahaz has turned his back on the God of life and the hope that only God can give, and the people panic about security, about food, and the economy. And people saw only misery all around them. For wisdom, the people desperately reached out to false prophets, to pollsters, analysts, economists. The darkness descends all around. At another level, this darkness is larger than one moment in time, because that darkness represents the power of death, disease, destruction, and decay, which threatens God's good creation. This power has shown up in the reign of Ahaz, and it keeps showing up anywhere military aggression is chosen over peace. When illness destroys our hope, and whenever fear overcomes faith, wherever death loudly boasts another victim. The good news proclaimed by Isaiah is that God will not abandon God's people to the darkness. God is at work to overcome death, to bring wisdom, peace, justice, and righteousness in ways that are hidden and seemingly as weak as a newborn child. But in that darkness, a light has shined. Therefore, we rejoice as people do at harvest time. We celebrate as victorious people because we have plundered our enemy, death. Every child of God that death has claimed, every hope that death has dashed, has been redeemed by the power of our loving God. One by one, the symbols of oppression, the rods, the boots of the enemy, the bloody uniforms, they are brought forward and tossed into the fire. And that promised child is pictured as a grown-up, a majestic king. Isaiah's language is Davidic, but it transcends all earthly kingship. The child will be strong. All authority will rest upon his shoulders. He will bring wisdom and power and endless peace. He will rule with justice and righteousness because the Lord of hosts is zealous to uphold him. Tonight, when we read this passage of Isaiah, we join with the gospel writer, Luke, in witness to proclaim that God's promise to send a child of hope has been a promise fulfilled over and over again throughout history, as has most definitely and gloriously been fulfilled in the child of Bethlehem. Isaiah reminds us that God's salvation is not a simple spiritual lullaby. The Christ child took on the power of death, and his birth signaled the time when the tools of war and injustice, the guns, the boots, unjust laws, the oppressor's rod, the illnesses, the cancers in our world, they have been consumed by the fire of God's great victory. O eternal God, from the tabernacle of heaven to poverty of a stable. Your radiant light shines forth in a tiny baby wrapped in rags. Such a humble love astounds us. In Jesus, you have become one with us, that we might become one with you. Open our hearts to joyfully receive his love, that he may be born in us and we in him, through Christ our Lord. Amen.